Littleproud was glowing in his assessment not only of Anne Webster, but also saying he'd found a role for a couple of former leaders in the form of Michael McCormack, the member for Riverina, who's going to take on international development and the Pacific, and Barnaby Joyce, who's the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs. So just magnanimous in his victory, putting those blokes with their tails between their legs in other places. I'm not sure there's much animosity between he and McCormack, but maybe he and Barnaby Joyce probably have not had much to say to each other lately.
Well, here on the Flow Morning Show, we take a look at our political editorial point for the day at the News24 desk. And with me is Rikki Lambert, and leadership and aspirations of our local members is our topic of discussion. Hi, Rikki.
I humbly accept your appointment to this segment.
Thank you very much. Because there's a fair bit of humbleness about the place today. I mean, we have the member for Barker, Tony Passon, who says, "I'm humbled to have been appointed the Shadow Assistant Minister for Infrastructure and Transport by the Leader of the Opposition." Then we have Anne Webster, who likewise says, "I was humbled to be called by David Littleproud and asked for the role of Regional Affairs Assistant Minister."
Well, there's a saying one of my former bosses used to be fond of saying, "I'm humble because I've got much to be humble about." Maybe they've got much to be humble about because they have been humbled at the federal election on the 21st of May.
Well, certainly have. On the case of Anne Webster, David Littleproud, who is the new Nationals leader, had this to say about her appointment.
Look, Anne Webster comes in a real talent, and I've been able to have some generational change and renewal. And that was the whole idea, to bring in people like Anne Webster. She'll be into regional development, but will bring a lot of skills also to the regional health portfolio. Her and her husband Philip are well known in the health circles in regional Victoria.
David Littleproud was glowing in his assessment not only of Anne Webster, but also saying he'd found a role for a couple of former leaders in the form of Michael McCormack, the member for Riverina, who's going to take on international development and the Pacific, and Barnaby Joyce, who's the Shadow Minister for Veterans Affairs. So just magnanimous in his victory, putting those blokes with their tails between their legs in other places. I'm not sure there's much animosity between he and McCormack, but maybe he and Barnaby Joyce probably have not had much to say to each other lately.
Well, maybe not. And this becomes the question, do you put what were former leaders, or some may say dead wood, into your ministry team? Others would say they've got a lot to offer and they're very experienced, and so having them still as having a role in, say, the inner sanctum is a good thing.
Well, look, taking a sort of Friday night sports show analogy of it, if you've got a couple of veteran players who are still fit to play and they can kick a few goals, yeah, you'd probably put them in a forward pocket or a back pocket somewhere to do their job. But I don't think either of them are threats anymore. I think that's why he's happy to put them in shadow ministry positions. But the likes of Keith Pitt, who was the water minister, he's on the outer. And as David Littleproud said in the full interview, you'll be able to hear on the FlowNews24 podcast, some people weren't happy that they weren't able to be included. But in the end, there's only so many gigs going around.
Well, let's ask one final question. It seems that across the Nationals web pages, all of their members and then even the Liberals too are all coming out as now in opposition to say that they are supporting nuclear energy. Why didn't they put that to the Australian people before the election? They might have actually won the election with that kind of a policy.
Yeah, it's a little bit of bull in my view, because they were very bearish about this sort of topic as a whole, the coalition in government, but suddenly they're all very bullish about it in opposition, which I think the voters don't take to very well, is that something you didn't have the fortitude to implement when you were in government, suddenly you're all for it in opposition. We're 3 years away from that potentially happening, so they can't go walloping a government for not doing something when they didn't do it themselves in government.
Very interesting point. The full interview with David Littleproud is up at the Flow News 24 podcast, and we'll keep you updated here at the Flow News 24 desk.